Welcome to this week's edition of the 6-5. I'm Patrick Moorhead with Moor Insights Strategy, and I am joined by my amazing co-host, Daniel Newman with Futurum Research. Daniel, how are you doing? It's late on a Friday. Hopefully we've got all our meetings knocked out and we can end the week with a giant bang.
Woo! What a week it's been. And are we getting tired of trying to figure out ways to describe each other? My ever-present, my outstanding, my omniscient, my super smart, oh boy. We just got to be like, this is who I'm here with, as if you didn't already know.
Listen, I like to lay the compliments on you. I know it helps you in your performance for business. So, I got to keep laying it on there, buddy. And you deserve it too.
I do. I deserve a lot of things.
So let's talk about the 6-5. What is the 6-5? Why do we call this the 6-5? Because it is 6 handpicked topics that we're going to cover for 5 minutes each. And we don't do news. I mean, if you want news, you can find news. We're all about analysis of the news. And part of this show, we are going to be talking about some companies' earnings today, Daniel. And but I want to point out this show is for information purposes only. And the contents of this show should not be taken as investment advice. You can listen to us, you can listen to the analysis, but don't use it to do any trades. Okay.
And don't trade on our behalf, but feel free to be entertained.
That's
we
right.
Definitely are here to entertain. Maybe inspire, maybe, inform. Yeah, but don't trade because of anything we say. But by the way, our advice usually is pretty darn good, though.
More right than we are wrong. But right on the right stuff, the important stuff. I'm wrong on the unimportant stuff. But anyways, let's dive in, Daniel. We do have some awesome topics. You and I both spent a tremendous amount of time at Microsoft Build, and Microsoft Build is Microsoft's developer trade show. Typically, it's face-to-face, but this year it was 100% online. Daniel and I have been watching a lot of these events online. Some of them have been good, bad, and the ugly. And I'm really happy to say that Microsoft, I think, set a new mark in terms of not only their analyst program, but their overall program for all of the developers. And what I wanted to do is just hit some highlights of the show, and then Daniel, I'd like for you to throw a couple out there. And I think for me, first and foremost, this was about Teams, and it's interesting. We think of Teams as the application that we collaborate with, but to me, the highlight was Teams as a platform. Because when you take Teams, you put that in with the Power Platform, which is low code, no code, and then you tie that in with Visual Studio to actually make bots that you can use into Teams. It becomes a complete platform. And that was the big message here. This wasn't about new Teams features, because that was 2 weeks ago that they rolled that. This was all about developers, and not just professional developers, but also developers who don't actually know how to code. And that's really important because as you all know, if you're an enterprise out there, it is hard to find good quality talent. And if you could find a tool that, let's say somebody knows how to do a Microsoft Excel macro, they can program too. And I really thought that Microsoft leaned into that.
Yeah, Pat, there was a lot that went on at this year's build. And listen, you and I can cut up the tech industry all day long, but we're not developers. I don't code anything. And so that actually is the perfect caveat, though, to why I was so enamored by so much of what was going on there. Low code, no code. Yeah. The future is the citizen developer. The future is the line of business leader that knows what they're looking for from their software and can define it in words, can define it in a chat, can use natural language processing, ML, AI, can use low code, no code solutions to explain and build. as our friend Alan Treffler from Pega said in a keynote I once heard, he said, software that writes itself. That is where we are heading. And that's a big part of where Microsoft is heading. So I was really, I felt that was a really big part of what was going on, all the low code, no code. The company leaned hard into automation. It acquired a company during the week called Softomotive, desktop automation. So they're making a hard lean into the companies like Automation Anywhere, UiPath. They're basically saying we can do RPA. We can do it all the way from end to end, everything from, your basic, screen scraping all the way to full business process automation, going big there. And of course, the sandbox that we will call Azure was a endless discussion, everything from, AI, ML ops, data, to workload portability to multi-cloud, hybrid cloud, a lot going on. Honestly, Pat, too much. I liked the event. I thought Microsoft has represented better than most companies, but it's really hard because when you're sitting at home, unlike when you're at the event and you can sort of use that as an excuse to only capture pieces of the content, I felt obliged to listen to everything and to consume everything. And it's so much. And what do they say? When it's everything, it's nothing. So the biggest thing I think most consumers and everyone out there that's listening to this is it's all available on demand. Pick out the sections that are interesting to you. Microsoft is definitely on the trajectory to being one of the world's most developer-friendly companies. And that is at the core of what makes it glue for its cloud, for its productivity and its tools and its teams. And as you start to merge these things together, you start to go, everything Microsoft's doing is very strategic, and don't confuse anything that's being done as anything more than a very fine strategy to keep customers glued into the Microsoft ecosystem.
Yeah, Daniel, there was so much that it took me a lot longer than usual to come up with my quick takes. In fact, I was so slow on my quick takes that I missed a lot of the press. But when I stood back, Teams and Power were huge, but also this notion of project reunion. There's a good and bad thing about having a mature operating system and platform. The good is that you've got a lot of people on Windows. The bad part is trying to get those developers to do things that are different. And Microsoft has tried so many different things. This latest one, I think, is the biggest because it actually decouples the operating system from the application layer. So Project Reunion enables a roadmap of adding features to applications without having to upgrade the operating system. And listen, there's no free lunches. You add some type of abstraction layer to anything, it has some consequences. I don't know what those are yet, but it's nice to see that. Who knows? Maybe we're on Windows 10 for a long, long time, and we don't see a Windows 11, but we do see improvements to the application environment. And the final thing, which I thought was great, which didn't get any coverage at all, the usage of Windows 10 is up 75% during pandemic. That's not sales, Daniel. That is actual usage. That's time on Windows. And for a platform, the iOS bigots or the Android bigots out there, or even the Mac OS, Windows is here. The PC never disappeared, and it's looking like making a comeback, not just to the work, govern, and school from home, but I think also improvements in Windows 10 quality and capability, plus a generational embrace from Gen Z. Gen Z is all over the PC platform in ways that millennials actually aren't. And it's pretty cool to see.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, Pat. It's a solid event. A lot to unpack. I think we could have done an entire build show. I think between the two of us, probably 5 or 6 articles. In fact, you and I even appeared in the same Business Insider article. I always laugh about that when
I know.
I see. Although nothing was as fun as when I was on my rowing machine the other day, and I saw what's his name from CNBC flashed you up there. Josh Lipton flashed you up there when he's talking about NVIDIA earnings. I'm like, I know that guy. Come on.
Yeah, at least it wasn't the ghost when I was on there for power lunch, because that was horrible.
Yeah, it's okay.
But hey, speaking of CNBC, we have a few earnings that we need to go through. HPE, or Hewlett Packard Enterprise, came out with their earnings last night, their Q2 earnings. Daniel, what did you think about that?
Did you see my eyes? Oh,
Yeah, they're red.
If you're listening to this, you just saw me rub my face. So I unpacked this last night. Tech has largely been unscathed so far. Not the case for HPE. It was a really tough quarter for HPE. I had the chance to really unpack the earnings. Revenue was down 16%. Earnings were down significantly from 64 to 22. But numbers themselves, you can read these anywhere. What does this mean? I mean, first, China. The first part of the year, the COVID-19 plus the trade issues with China, that's going to have a big issue on the whole supply chain for HPE, and it clearly came through. Every one of the company's major 6 segments down year over year. That's a significant flashpoint. The other thing that I think was pretty alarming was the company put out sort of what I call an emergency plan, which was both alarming and positive because, like I said, clearly it understood the need to come into this meeting with a plan to present to Wall Street, and it did. It's got a plan. Its executives took significant pay cuts. I like seeing it start there because basically executives are setting the tone for the company. But it scares me a little bit, Pat, because when companies start cutting, a lot of times it starts cutting in areas that it can't afford to cut. For instance, investments in the marketing and the sales efforts of a company, when you're facing more staunch competitors, you got Dell, you got Cisco, you got IBM, but you also got AWS, you got Azure, all competitors to really some of the core businesses of HPE. If the company starts, contracting its sales and marketing too much, it's going to risk fading into anonymity right now in a very crowded landscape. But a couple of good pieces that I do want to point out, and then I'll turn it back over to you. The company's had this as a service strategy. Antonio Neri has impressively pivoted the company to everything as a service. 17% growth despite everything that's going on. $520 million run rate. I'd like to see that edging closer to $1 billion in the very near future. That would be a very big moment for HPE. And the last thing was the backlog. The backlog was about twice its typical number at about $1.5 billion, which means there is a chance if some things loosen up, if the economy starts to turn the corner, that HPE could have sort of a makeup quarter where it might actually exceed expectations. Having said that, we won't know what expectations are because in the wake of everything going on, the company pulled its guidance going forward.
Yeah, it was good analysis, Daniel. And really the only thing that I'll add is I did get the chance to talk to HPE CEO Antonio Neri after the call, and I did ask him about the reductions, the cost reductions, and he really felt that a lot of it was going to come from enhanced digitization that they were doing on the supply chain side, but also some rebalancing in skill sets. He was very upfront with me that says, listen, we've learned a lot about facilities. We learned a lot about how the business operates. And so I don't think it's going to be, another massive HPE restructuring that we've come to know and dislike. I think it's going to be something different. Like you, I was impressed to see the backlog that was monster, and ARR, which essentially reflects their as a service business, was actually up. A lot of supply chain issues, okay? And I'm going to be really interested next week to see what Dell says. Dell has the largest enterprise supply chain in existence, and we'll see if they have the same issues. Long term, I think HPE's got a good strategy. They should stick to it. And like you, Daniel, I don't want to see a bunch of cuts being made.
Yeah, absolutely, Pat. I think between the two of us, though, we got this. We got this in check. If you're out there listening, HPE, lean into that everything as a service. That has been your leading differentiator. That's what the market's chasing. You've made some serious investments there. Platforms, frameworks, software. That's where you're ahead. So make sure that that's where the focus is, especially as it pertains to true hybrid architecture.
Absolutely. Let's move to NVIDIA here. Daniel, you've written some really great stuff on NVIDIA. We both covered their GTC 2020 last week as well, and you actually had the chance to talk to Jensen a couple weeks ago, which I know was pretty awesome. And you pulled that into one of your Market Watch columns. This the latest quarter, it's interesting. Q1 2021, they announced yesterday, and you can look up all the numbers yourself, but it was incredible. I mean, they had every single business except for automotive was up. Data center was up. Gaming was up. Workstation was up. The A100 data center training inference appears to be on a rocket ship start, a very good sign. And gaming and workstation growth are directly tied to their competitive products and the need to work, govern, and school from home. And nobody should have been surprised on gaming or pro visualization. I listened to a conference call that they had a couple of weeks ago, wrote a Forbes article on it. Essentially, their CFO said this was going to be the case. So no surprises there. And Daniel, NVIDIA is they're a juggernaut. And, I'm trying to look for, I was talking to Josh Lipton from CNBC. We were talking about it before he got on when you were on the rowing machine. And he said, okay, Pat, what's something that can hold them up? And I'll be honest, I had a hard time thinking about it, right? Is it execution? Is it market size and growth? No. Is it competition? Maybe, but nothing in the short term is going to touch this company. Just phenomenal.
Yeah, Pat, I wrote up, I was going through the earnings and I'm like, gush. And you're not supposed to gush as an analyst. So I had to stop, but it was terrific. I actually had to ask in my analyst briefing call, is Mellanox in this number or not? Because it's really good. Let's talk about a little bit of that. So you're talking about 3.08 billion, first time cracking 3 billion, Mellanox acquisition, Cumulus Networks acquisition, a massive launch at GTC, which we talked about on our last episode. So I won't bore you, but some really impressive stuff. So it basically hit on all fronts. Growth in every area except for automotive. And even in automotive, where you could think the business should pretty much be zero, the business was almost flat. So it wasn't down all that much. A ton of wins in gaming. RTX had a number of wins. And also GeForce Pro had 100 new design wins. So you're seeing that NVIDIA find itself in products down market, which is going to be a big win for the company going forward. So if I had to kind of lean into really what caught my attention, though, it's all about the data center, Pat. Data center was just a blowout. 80% growth over year. 80%. I mean, we always talk about the law of large numbers. When you're at numbers this large, an 80% growth rate is like obscene. I mean, so when I saw that, I was just like, whoa, what happened? And that's why I actually asked, like, are you sure Mellanox isn't in this number? Had to do that double and triple take. And here's where it came from, Pat. E-commerce exploded, and that meant more AI, more ML. That's more conversational, more chatbots, and more recommenders. In order to basically scale up those workloads to be able to recommend products and services to people and filling up their shopping carts with e-commerce, you need more GPU power. That meant big investments coming from hyperscalers, enterprise data centers all over the world, which was big for the NVIDIA GPU lines, led to a lot of data center business. Of course, the company had was touting a lot of its wares for its COVID-19 response. That's everybody. We don't need to really dive into that too much. But here's the thing to kind of, the only thing that sort of caught the company a little bit was guidance was okay. I mean, They're adding in the revenue for Mellanox next quarter. They're kind of looking at flat. They're saying that we're going to have a big decline in automotive. Margin is going to be somewhat flat. So, I would say going forward, though, you've got a tale of two companies. We had HPE, no real clarity, big cut strategy, a company that has the potential, but is in transition, facing tough financial situations. And then, Pat, you have NVIDIA, which literally is a rocket ship. And you got to remember something, too. Jensen actually announced giving his entire company raises early during this quarter. So he gave everybody a payroll raise and then committed, despite what was going on, to not terminate any employees throughout this pandemic. So literally, it's a company on fire, a lot to be excited about. But you know what? I still look at the challengers. I see AMD, I see Intel. They will continue to press NVIDIA. So NVIDIA may have leaped across for the moment, but I expect those companies to come out with important announcements that are going to continue to press innovation, which will benefit the market as a whole.
Yeah, as a fearless leader of Intel said, only the paranoid survive, and NVIDIA is about as paranoid as it gets, which is part of the reason for their success, I think. So let's move off of earnings and on to the launch of the Google Apple contact tracing app. We had heard an announcement about it a few weeks back, but it is finally here. Is this going to be the app that can effectively separate us, be able to track those who are infected without having to have restaurants like in Austin write our people's names and addresses, phone numbers, and where we sat inside the restaurant? Daniel, what does all this mean?
Yeah, there's a ton of news out there, Pat, and we promise no news and just analysis. So let's analyze this for a minute, right? So you've got two companies that probably would never intentionally want to work on anything together coming together. So that's interesting. It does show the solidarity that we've mentioned on an ongoing basis, Patrick, of the tech industry, the heroes in tech. Now, of course, the heroes aren't actually tech. The heroes are all these people that are on front lines doing meaningful stuff. But tech has been, in its own way, a heroine in this greater story. And seeing these two companies come together to build something. Now, the privacy is still a massive issue. We've got huge divides throughout the country of whether or not people will use these applications. These companies aren't what I would say well trusted in all cases by their users, and people aren't necessarily interested in having their data of everything they do being traced and tracked. On the other hand, though, I do firmly believe that if we want to expedite the process back to a more normal, I'm so tired of hearing new normal, so let's call it more normal, this kind of application could be a cog in that wheel, because basically the challenge is when someone gets exposed to someone that has it, the sooner that person gets isolated and gets into quarantine and stops spreading, the more we keep that R factor down below 1.1. That's the number of people that someone who is contagious spreads the disease to. If you immediately find out, hey, we went out to dinner, we sat in this table, and it turns out the guy at the table next to us was infected, and you were there, go quarantine, it gives a chance to stop you and the 5 people that you were with from spreading it. So this is not just a discussion about Apple, Google. It's really a discussion about contact tracing as a whole. I think these are the companies most fit. You look between Android and Apple, just about every affluent American and around most of the world carries one of these devices. The opting in is going to be the key. If you can't get a large percentage of the population and those most at risk to opt in, this could end up being a lot of effort without a lot of return.
Yeah, I think that's good analysis. And I think this is going to really test privacy. And I'm glad to see Apple in on this. They know privacy. They don't benefit from giving up privacy. Google, on the other hand, 90% of their revenue is based on advertising, which requires personal information. So I know if I could protect people, if I could go to more places, I would turn the app on. But it's going to be really a personal thing. So Daniel, let's bounce back into earnings. But it's interesting. Before we do that, what I wanted to do, some people ask, hey, as industry analysts, why do you pay attention to earnings so much? You're not financial analysts, buy side or sell side, and I follow earnings because it's ground truth, right? Companies will tell you as much truth as they'll ever tell anybody, because as a company, you stretch the truth, you get sued, you get fined, or you go to jail, right? So I want to see what ground truth is. It also helps me more quickly predict share gains and losses. Right, when I line up, how vSAN did versus Nutanix, and maybe I can squeak out SimpliVity out of an HPE, I've got a pretty good idea of what's going on in the HCI market. I also like to predict ancillary markets. When somebody like Intel, the chip makers, talk about how they did, and that cloud was up 80%, I have a pretty darn good idea on what's going on inside of AWS and Google. And finally, and Daniel, you can join me on this as well. It's fun. It's fun to do and talk about what's going on. And in fact, you covered another company who had earnings this quarter, which was Splunk. Can you take us through their first quarter?
Yeah, and I just want to elaborate on one thing you said, why we do this, Pat. I like going on TV. Oh, wait, that's not a reason to do it? No, I'm totally kidding. But there is another thing. You talk about ground truth, and you talk about, think about how many times you and I sit on a briefing call, maybe right around the time a company's reported earnings, and they've got some exec or sales leader just talking to you about how great things are. And if you actually read the earnings, it's all there. Meaning the only reason you would listen to that over the earnings would be laziness. So if you actually get into earnings, what I said, you say it's truth. I say there's no better way to understand the fundamental performance of a business's strategy than looking at its financial performances. If it's a great strategy, it either makes money, or at the very least, the earnings will disclose how this strategy will eventually turn into money. So I love it. I think it's the line. I think you have to blend the tech in the industry and the equities in order to truly get a picture on a company. So speaking of a picture on a company, Splunk and CEO Doug Merritt, reported yesterday. Company should be very pleased. I mean, it has been growing. So it's been in this pivot. So Splunk is their platform proclaims data to everything, but it's really an IT ops management, security ops management tool. So it's basically a streaming data management tool. And they're up revenue. Their focus has been converting to recurring revenue. They've seen their recurring revenue this year shoot to $1.775 billion, up 52%. Their cloud revenue jumped up. So they've been also in this pivot from licensing to recurring and then to cloud. They usurped the 100 million mark with an 81% growth in cloud. Total revenues, saw a small growth, and the company unfortunately is still losing money. So it's like a tech startup, but it's moving in the right direction. The key here has been watching its shift to SaaS and to recurring revenue. Its business model is really built, for DevOps, for IT ops, and for SecOps to be able to drive and be at the very overlaying level of all data management for companies. They announced some new partnerships, which are really important with Google, expanded their platform with AWS, provided data support services to a number of data testing response programs for Splunk and or for COVID. And probably one of the things is they did, according to one firm that I will not name because we don't name firms that do this, but they did actually become the documented #1 market share in performance analysis, AI ops, IT management, and monitoring tools. So the company's really shooting itself in the right trajectory. I'm excited because it looks like their CEO, Doug Merritt, by the way, will be on our 6.5 Summit as one of our speakers, which you're going to hear more about that on this show in the coming weeks, by the way. We haven't really started plugging it yet, but boy, do we have a great set of companies. So positive for Splunk. It was sort of mixed in the results. The market didn't react overly up or down about it, but another company that seems to be weathering a difficult time very well because of its transition to cloud recurring revenue, and it's one to watch going forward, Pat.
Yeah, I'm just fascinated by Splunk and where it started and what it's become. I mean, it's funny. My nephew was playing around with Splunk when he was at Ohio State University getting his degree, and it ended up getting him a job being a manager at one of the world's largest insurance companies doing security because he knew Splunk. And I can't believe, and I give the company a lot of credit for doing its flexing on its #1 market share in 3 areas. It's turned into basically a side project and what looked like a hobby into a real business. And I'm super impressed, and I cannot wait to have the company on the 6.5 Summit. So we are going to close out with our last topic, an acquisition that Intel made of Rivet Networks. And I'm glad I got to take this one because Rivet Networks is actually out of Austin, Texas. It's gone back and forth. It used to be its own company. Then Qualcomm acquired it. Then it spun it out, and then it went on its own. And you may know Rivet Networks in terms of killer networking that Alienware and Dell puts in their products. And essentially what it is Rivet knows everything about the management of wireless. And in this case, what's in the market today, Wi-Fi. So anybody out there might have some issues with connectivity with, let's say, Zoom or Skype or Teams or even ping on Overwatch. Well, that's because there's no intelligent management of traffic of the network inside of the PC or inside of the device. And what Rivet does is essentially does packet prioritization in an intelligent way. When you and I are doing this podcast, Daniel, and if I started kicking in, a 1 terabyte download because I'm bored, or I got an email from somebody, that could mess up our stream. And what this does, it intelligently prioritizes that traffic. Now, Intel wouldn't make a big deal. They had a press release. They did a lot of outreach. I did a few interviews myself. If it was just for what they have today. And while Intel didn't say this, I think that this is part of Project Athena, which is Intel's program to improve the PC experience. And I also think, and again, this isn't not in the Intel talking points of the press release, I also think they're going to use this software to have a better experience with things like 5G PCs, to know when to go between Wi-Fi and 5G and do it and not lose data, prioritize that traffic, even do things very intelligently when the PC is closed, so it can actually get email and data without sucking all of the battery life down. So it was amazing that Intel made such a big deal out of it. It was a 20-person startup, but it was cool nonetheless, given the history that I have with the company, but also in what they could potentially do with it.
Yeah, no question about it, Pat. I haven't had a chance to fully dive into it, but it sounds like a really exciting acquisition. I'll probably do some reading up on it over the weekend. Love hearing that Austin has another company. I am slowly but surely convincing myself to be one of the people of Austin. Maybe just next year, Pat.
Man, we would love to have you. We'll roll out the red carpet here. Make sure that you don't visit in the middle of summer, because if you haven't figured it out yet, Austin is pretty hot in August, and you want to be near a lake. You want to be near a river, wherever you can stay cool.
Yeah, absolutely, buddy. Well, I'm going to try to find myself in the hills, overlooking the lake, in the shade with a pool. You don't need a heated pool. You need an air-conditioned pool. Exactly. I'm going to be frying on fire. But no, it was another great week in tech, Pat. It was exciting. Lots going on. Lots to talk about. Lots to chat about. Lots more to come. And as always, no better way to wrap up our week than an episode of The 6-5.
And if you like what you heard, press that subscribe button and get ready, because we're going to have an exciting week next week as well. Everybody stay tuned. Have a great weekend. Stay safe. Wear your masks where you need to, and take care.